move on to our panel discussion. So we're going to kind of continue this discussion on, a little bit of processing, but also shift focus a little bit to the direct marketing angle and talk about some of the kind of labeling guidelines that go along with that, as well as kind of some tips or considerations for successfully direct marketing. So I just really briefly wanted to introduce our panelists. So we have with us Molly Gillingham with MDA. Molly, are you on here? Oh yeah, I see your name.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Molly is the program manager for the Food Quality Assurance Program. So they work to kind of conduct quality assurance inspections on farms in Maryland. And I'm sure Delaware has probably a similar program through the Delaware Department of Agriculture. We also have Craig Sewell with us. Craig, are you here as well?
I am.
Okay, perfect. And Craig is with SMADC, or the Southern Maryland Agricultural Development Commission. And he is kind of their livestock or meats expert, as well as the program manager for the Southern Maryland Meats Program. And then our third panelist here today is Darlene Goerhringer. Darlene, I think I saw you join earlier. You're here, correct?
I am here.
Okay, perfect. And she is one of the owners of Pop's Old Place, which is a farm in Dorchester County, Maryland. And they raise grass-fed and finished beef, lamb, pork, and free-range hens, and sell products directly from an on-farm store that they have there. So that's just kind of a very brief intro of each of our panelists. And we have many other experts here as well who can feel free to chime in as we go along. But I thought to kind of kick things off, I would turn it over to each of our panelists to kind of just give us a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes on kind of their background, their kind of area of expertise or what they're working on, and their experiences so far. So I don't know if maybe Molly, would you be willing to kick us off?
Yep, and I can go ahead and share my screen, correct?
Yes, let me make sure you are.
Okay, so like Amanda said, I'm Molly Gillingham. I'm with the Maryland Department of Agriculture. I'm the program manager for the Food Quality Assurance Program. Kind of going to just, this is a list of kind of some of the services we provide here in food quality assurance. So we do a lot with poultry. We do egg grading, poultry grading. We do a lot with egg inspections. We also have a poultry and rabbit processing program. We do some beef grading for USDA. We do grain grading. We do organic certification, GAPS, produce safety, and some commodity grading. So I figured I would go through some of the livestock and animal requirements as far as direct marketing within the state. So first up, we have a lot of people who do poultry and rabbits. So if you have under like 20,000 slaughtered annually, there's a certain requirements that you need to follow in order to sell directly to your consumer. So it must be your own production. You can go without a license from the Department of Health and MDA if you're selling directly from the farm to your consumer. If you want to sell to retailers, restaurants, or farmers markets, it must be inspected by USDA. If you want to do interstate, if you're just sticking to within Maryland, it can be inspected by us at MDA. It can be slaughtered, packaged, and labeled at USDA inspected facility and then returned to your farm for sale. Some of the licenses that are required. So at the Department of Health, you need one of their processing license for storage, and that depends on your sales value. So if you're under that 40,000, you can just get their on-farm home processing license. And then if you're over that 40,000, you need their processing license. However, you don't need a license through the Department of Health if you participate in our MDA's poultry rabbit processing program. And then the second license you would need is if you're selling at farmers market, is that mobile farmers market license from them. And then some storage requirements. If you're selling the product fresh, just a 40-degree Fahrenheit temperature. And if you're doing frozen, it's 0 degrees. And that frozen can be done either through a commercial freezer, or at the farmers market, you can use dry ice or just a regular freezer unit. If you have over that 20,000 slaughtered annually, licenses and storage remains the same. You just need to have USDA continuous inspection required for the slaughtering and processing of those animals. So about the Maryland Department of Agriculture Poultry and Rabbit Processing Program. So those who participate in our program are considered an approved source by the Department of Health and can sell anywhere within the state of Maryland. So that includes to restaurants, retailers, farmers markets. You can sell both parts and whole animals, but no ground meat. The only requirements we have is that one person must attend our training, follow some of the basic requirements of our program, which include like biosecurity measures, having the location of processing protected from contamination, equipment cleaning, potable water, adequate lighting, toilet and hand washing facilities, practices for health and hygiene. You're monitoring the temperature of the processed animal after processing, and having some SOPs and good management practices. You are subject to an inspection by one of our inspectors at the Department of Ag. For record keeping, you just need to record date of slaughter, number of animals processed, and if you have any sick animals, you need to segregate, you got to record that number. As far as selling, you are required to have invoices if you're selling to retailers and any restaurants. And if you're just selling at the farmer's market or direct to the consumer, you just need a sales record. Labeling, so it must be in a food grade packaging. You need to have your name and address, the identity of the product, your MDA number that you're issued when you're registered with us, the net weight, the exempt statement, data process, and of course the safe handling instructions. So next, I'll talk about all the other meats. So pork, beef, lamb, goat, it must be slaughtered and processed under continuous USDA inspection. Products that are slaughter packaged and labeled at these USDA inspected facilities can be returned to the farm to be sold to retailers, any consumer. License that are required would be, again, that Department of Health processing license for storage. Same if for like the sales value. If you're under the 40,000, you need the on farm home processing. Over 40,000, you need just the processing license. However, if you are a part of our Maryland Department of Agriculture Poultry and Rabbit program, you don't need to, you aren't required to have one of these licenses. Someone from MDA can inspect your storage when we're doing your poultry and rabbit processing. So that helps to cut down on that cost for that license. If you are going to sell the product at farmers markets, you do need that mobile farmers market license. And again, the storage temperatures are the same, 40 degrees for fresh and 0 for frozen. And then I thought I'd just throw in something about eggs. We do require wholesalers and packers in Maryland who sell eggs to register with us annually. Requirements are to only pack clean eggs, and you must meet the standards for the grade and size that you're labeling as, and keeping the temperature at 45 degrees. Some of the labeling requirements that the cartons must contain include grade, size, the safe handling statement, packer, distributor name and address, lot number, and then the MDA registration number that you're assigned, quantity or net weight, and the identity of the product. The license, of course, you need to register with us annually, and then you're not required to obtain a license from the Department of Health to sell or transport eggs to the farmers markets, retailers, or restaurants if you're registered with us. And then we do require invoices if you're selling to restaurants and retailers to have your name and address, the buyer name and address, grade, size, quantity, and date of delivery. And that's just a brief overview of what we do at MDA. And then of course, I'm open for questions.
Great, thank you, Molly. We'll continue with our kind of introduction of speakers, and then we will open up for more questions and discussion at the end. If you do think of questions or have questions that you want addressed as we're finishing with our speaker intros, please feel free to put those in the chat or make a note of them so we can address those after that. So Craig, let's turn it over to you. I'll let you, you should have the ability to share if you would like, or you're welcome to just have a discussion as well. And we'll let you proceed with your quick overview.
Thanks, Molly. I'm going to be really boring and have these good folks stare at my face for the next few minutes. I don't have a PowerPoint. First, I would like to thank Charlie Sassler. Charlie, that was a great presentation, and we're happy to have you in Southern Maryland. But I'd like to give you an overview of what we have done and what we are doing in Southern Maryland to confront a lot of the issues that we've been talking about here. The impact of COVID, our marketing, our labeling strategies, how we get our product from the farmer's field into people's kitchens, and how we're financing some of this as well. So just a little bit about me. I don't come at this as a producer. I come at this as a cook. I had my own restaurant in Annapolis for 16 years. I was the first, started 20 years ago. We introduced the first CSA into the Annapolis marketplace. We did a market basket program where people could order through me from local farms. We also were a locally sourcing restaurant, which was, I have to say, not the wisest thing I've ever done in my life, but one of the more challenging ones. And in trying to bring local foods from local producers on and introduce them to consumers is something I know a lot about. I'm going to take a slightly different view than the Hartman Group did on the graphic that you showed, Brian, in that I took a really hard view of a hard look at my customers and why they came to me. 25% of my customers came to me because I sourced locally. They liked that idea. They liked the taste. They liked the flavor. They liked knowing where their food came from. They liked all of that. Another 25% of my customers came to me because I was a locally owned independent business, and they wanted to support their local economy by frequenting small businesses such as mine. But 50% of my customers didn't care about any of those things. They came to me simply because they liked good food presented by friendly people in a nice atmosphere where they could always depend on a good product. I needed those 50% desperately to be able to make it a viable business enterprise. So when the people from SMADC asked me to come on board 4 years ago, I brought with me those sort of ideas that we need to bring our product to market in as an effective and as convenient way as possible, because I heartily believe that most people, most consumers, given the opportunity, would rather buy local foods over commercially based foods. We just don't make it very easy for them to do that. So to be able to make those choices easier for a consumer, a number of things have to happen. I'm very fortunate in Southern Maryland to have a program called Southern Maryland Meats. We have most of the livestock producers in Southern Maryland are members of Southern Maryland Meats. It doesn't cost anything. It's a program of SMADC. It's in its most basic meaning. People agree, producers agree, that they will give their animals access to pasture, that they don't use antibiotics. There's no antibiotic use and no growth hormones. So some very basic sort of things that they all agree on. The livestock industry in Southern Maryland is subject to a lot of the factors that livestock producers all over the country are facing. which is a lack of production processing facility. So they've been trying for years to attract processors to Southern Maryland. When I came on board, I started working with our local Amish community in St. Mary's County, who had always done custom work for themselves, for their community, and for some other people. And we had to talk about actually having them do a USDA inspected processing facility and being able to expand into that market space. It took 2.5 years. But I can tell you that now that the Amish at the Weston Butcher Shop are now working under USDA inspection and have been for about the last 10 months. I did their HACCP plan, their SOPs, their GMPs, their SSOPs, and all the rest of that. One item of interest is that the slaughterhouse is completely off the grid, and one of the few slaughterhouses, if not the only slaughterhouse in the country that is completely off the grid, which also means that all the logging, documentation, accounting for all the things that we do in the building is all done by hand. So none of the documentation is done by computer or whatever, but at any rate, so part of localized production has happened, but that still leaves cut and wrap, added value, those sort of things, labeling, marketing, all those things still needed. So once again, I've been fortunate in that SMADC was able to provide a certain amount of money, and we started working with St. Mary's County government, and we are now actively under construction of a almost $5 million regional agricultural center, which we call the RAC, the RAC, which will be anchored by a butcher shop and an added value operation, as well as instructional kitchens to do apprenticeship programs for meat cutters, commercial kitchens for cottage food and teach regulatory issues and that sort of thing, and cold storage facilities for aggregation and distribution. All this points to the fact of being able to have localized processing under USDA inspection, which could, on the one hand, simply make it more convenient for our producers to be able to get their cuts done locally, and they can sell it at farmers markets or off of farm stores or whatever. But it will also give us the opportunity to be able to aggregate under the Southern Maryland Meats label, to be able to do a number of things, and one of which would be to be able to go after institutional type sales. So the 1,000 pounds of ground beef that goes to whatever county schools that now come in processed, flash frozen, 3-ounce bundles from God knows where, might be able to be serviced from Southern Maryland Processing Center directly to the local schools or the hospitals or prisons or whatever, to be able to meet that particular thing. That would come under the butchery and almost under a retail exempt sort of situation. We're also trying to do, we're doing the 2+2s on meat processing. Talked to a lot of people and been to a lot of places around the country over the last 4 years, where it's, wow, we need a local butcher, we need a local processing center, so we don't have to take our animals hither and yon or have to wait months or whatever to get them processed. And the road is littered by a lot of those very good intentions that were not able to be financially viable over the course of 2, 3, 4 years. To be able to do that, at least in my opinion, we need to add considerable value to our meats however we can. So to put in an added value charcuterie type, added value finer meats processing facility within the RAC, in my opinion, is a vital part in making sure this is a financially viable enterprise to be able to push the meat out to our consumers, which means distribution, which means that if a Southern Maryland consumer hopefully goes to where they usually buy their ground beef and sees Southern Maryland Meats ground beef next to ground beef coming from wherever, that they will opt for the local product, even though it may cost a little bit more than the more commercial product. We will need to prove that out. That's my belief that we can do that. In the interim, just for brevity's sake, in the interim, before the rack is completed, which won't be until the last quarter of next year, because these things never happen quickly, is that we will be starting a box meat program with the Southern Maryland Meats members to be able to take their products and add another marketing and sales outlet to them, other than simply selling it on farm or selling it at their farmer's market. So I will just leave it at that for now, Amanda. And if folks have questions about where we're headed on this, I'd be glad to answer them.
Great. Thank you, Craig. I do see we have a question, but before we get to questions, I'm gonna let Darlene introduce herself. And she has asked me to share. Let's see if I can bring it.
We can actually share that as we get further. Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, I just was going to do a brief introduction and we can kind of go over that. I don't know that I'm not sure in the next step of this, are we going to each talk about the individual, correct?
Yeah, that's fine. I can.
Yeah, so I can just do that then if that's okay with you.
Yep.
I'm not really sure. It's been a while since I've done this. I don't know how to get my camera on. What am I doing here? There we go. Good morning, everybody. So far, I've really enjoyed this and I'm taking notes and I hope that I can bring something to the table. So as Amanda said, I and my husband have a small farm in Dorchester County, and we raise grass-fed beef, lamb, pork on pasture, eggs, and honey. And then we're doing some sourdough breads and things like that. So prior to going full-time on the farm, which has only been a year for me, I worked off farm in a full-time job in the corporate world, and I worked for Cisco Foods, which seems to be a surprising to some people. And in that capacity, for the first 7 years of my 21-year career with them, I was in sales. And the last 14 years of my stint with Cisco, I was a business consultant. So in that, I helped people set up systems to be profitable and worked with them on training and marketing. Once I got into playing around with the idea of being a farmer, I just was like, boy, this is like on the job training for the next job. So it worked out really, really well for me. And it was very beneficial. And I'm sorry, I have a puppy at my feet. So I'm trying to entertain her a little bit too. So we started out raising food for our family, you know, similar to what Craig was saying. I mean, it's the cooking that brought me to the farming. I was raised on a farm and my parents farmed with, early in my childhood, we raised beef and pork and vegetables and things like that. My mother was an amazing cook. And then as a young adult, I just realized I really, really missed those flavors. So thankfully, I have a husband that's willing to go along for the ride, and he has a farming background as well. So he was transitioned to animals pretty easily. But I was searching for a flavor that was familiar to me as a child, you know, and when I found that, it was grass-fed. And I have some really quirky things that are very important to me as far as nutrition. And I don't know that it's right or wrong. It's my own personal preference, but I knew that I wanted animals on pasture. The ones that are fed a grain, I wanted it personally to be a non-GMO grain, and I'm not looking, you know, to dispute if somebody disagrees with that. And I found it and I really, really enjoyed it. So we started raising chicken, rabbit, smaller animals in the beginning, and I just found that wasn't a good fit for me personally. I like working with the larger livestock. Because I worked off farm, I knew I didn't want to pack up every single weekend and go to a farmer's market. You know, I was already away from my family 5 to 6 days a week because of my corporate job. So I just decided, after attending a conference down at University of Maryland Eastern Shore, small farm conference, and the idea of on-farm sales, I really had never even heard of it. So with Dr. Escobar and Ginger Myers and things like that, I discovered that. And then I started going around and visiting farms, seeing what I liked and what I didn't like and what I wanted to replicate. So that's kind of how we started. And we started with, 2 freezers in our garage, and it's just slowly transitioned. It's doing really well. And, with me, we're so limited on our acreage that I knew in order to be profitable, I had to have a super niche market. And that's just what I've gone after. I do very few bulk sales. I'm probably priced above almost anybody you could find, especially on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. But so far it's working. And I'll be glad to share my experiences with marketing. And I don't know how far you want me to get in with that now. But the channels that I use for marketing mainly are Facebook, Instagram, email, website, and the Google business page. And I can get into the frequencies of that, as we go on.
Great, thank you, Darlene. I think we'll slowly start addressing some questions before we get kind of back to maybe like the timing and marketing strategies that Darlene mentioned. There was a question for you, Craig, on elaborating on the antibiotics rule for the Southern Maryland meats. Does that mean no antibiotics ever? AKA not treating sick animals or not allowing animals that have been treated for illness to enter that food chain, even if they've completed their withdrawal time? Or does it mean no blanket use of antibiotics?
It does not mean no blanket use. It does not mean no antibiotics ever. If antibiotics are medically necessary, separation of the animal from the rest of the herd, then that's acceptable. But then there are also the withdrawal time limits that are placed on the producers as well before it can be brought into market.
Great, thank you. If there are other questions on that, feel free to put those in the chat. If you have questions on kind of more of the rules, the labeling, the legality, we can steer the conversation that way a little bit. If you have more questions on, kind of what's going on in Southern Maryland, what they're working on down there, we can steer the conversation that way. And I don't see any right this minute. Oh, we do have one. How does that differ from regular meat? I think that's for you as well, Craig.
That begs me to be a spokesman for regular meats, and I can't be a spokesman for regular meats. However, I would hope that they would follow the same protocols that I just described. And certainly,
well, they have to because that's the law.
Okay.
So I guess my question is if you're allowed to, if in order to market through your marketing chain, if you are allowed to treat an animal with an antibiotic when necessary, which is the way most producers operate anyway, and respect the label withdrawal times, and
right.
So then a producer that's producing beef in the normal channels, normal ways, could still market through your labeling or branding.
In that particular case, it's true. I think that probably the most important part of the entire Southern Maryland meats standards is the access to pasture. They wanted to, when they set this up, which was probably about 10 years ago, they didn't want to necessarily exclude people that grain finished over people that grass finished. But they also didn't want to foster they want to differentiate themselves from any sort of CAFO sort of situation, so that all of their animals have access to pasture.
All right, thank you, Craig. Maybe Darlene will take a few minutes to kind of go into a little bit more details on things that you've used for direct marketing and what you found useful from the producer kind of side of things.
Perfect. So like I said earlier, there's, I guess, 5 main channels that I use: Facebook, Instagram, email, website, and then I manage my Google business page. And you find that by going just on the Google search and typing in, Google My Business, and it will ask for you for the criteria. If you haven't claimed your business prior to that, it will allow you to walk through. They'll verify that it's really you by actually calling you. And then you can manage that. So it helps you show up on GPS, all kinds of search engines. So I think that's a really good thing to do. And most people don't add their farm business to the Google My Business thing. So I kind of have a schedule of how I market. Try to anyway, if life doesn't get in the way, daily on Facebook and Instagram. And I use Instagram stories. It's a lot of work marketing direct. And you just know that that's part of the business plan that you're going into when you have an on-farm. A lot of times people want to farm because they don't want to deal with people, but that's a critical part to getting money coming in. Instagram stories, I usually post something on there multiple times a day. Twice a month, I send out an email newsletter. I personally use the GoDaddy platform because it's very easy for me to use. And I've tried 2 or 3 others, and you have to find what works for you. And that cost me probably about $400 a year to manage the website and newsletter and things like that through GoDaddy. Monthly, I update my personal website just to kind of keep that algorithm that says there's somebody behind there. And I do the same thing with the business page. If for some reason you are seasonal, I'm year round, I really want to encourage people, don't disappear off the grid, 5 months out of a year, because the algorithm changes and you have to start all over again as far as social media. And I have about 5 categories that I usually stick with marketing. We want to be careful not to always be selling. One, nobody likes a used car salesman, right? So you've got to have there has to be something in it for the consumer. So my marketing categories fall into 5 sections usually. Mostly it's about cooking, because without families cooking, I don't have an audience. So I do lots of cooking, baking, videos, pictures, recipes. One of the other categories is, I'm always promoting the animals and how they live on pasture, and that people can feel good about that the animal had a good life. And with that, I want to caution people, you can get really heavy on baby pictures, like it's baby lambs were born and baby calves were born. But my consumer, I've had people say, oh, I don't want to eat that animal because it looks so cute. So they don't realize that the baby lamb I'm showing today is not the leg of lamb I'm showing tomorrow. So I caution, I don't do as much of that as I did at one point. The third category that I focus on is environmental. Usually it's either pollinators or explaining the benefits of grazing or how I see it, my farming practices, things like that. I try not to be political, because 50% of my audience is probably one political affiliation and 50% is the other. So I try to keep some of that. My environmental is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm not, and that's just the way it is. The fourth category is lifestyle. So that's where you see pictures of me, my family, my interests, my hobbies, my pets, things like that. People buy from people they like and people they feel like they know. So it gets them to kind of know me as a person, and then they can decide if I'm somebody they want to help support. And then the fifth one is I'm promoting and collaborating with other organizations and businesses. So whether it's the Beekeepers Association or Future Harvest or anything like that, there has to be something in it for other people. I care about those, so why not share it? We've been very fortunate that we've been featured in quite a few local periodicals, and that's happened organically. I haven't reached out to those people to do that, but I don't discourage anyone from reaching out. I don't use Snapchat. I don't use Twitter. That's not where I see my customer base. And when we were looking, I think it was Brian was talking about, your core customer. I'd say I'm almost 50-50 male to female. And I would say 75% of my customers are over 50 very easily. And I would think on the income scale, we're getting there at the top, middle to upper income. So social media is great for exposure, but it's really hard to take that and turn it into sales. So I use Facebook and Instagram just to create awareness. And then I'm always trying to drive traffic to my website. So I don't think, short of I do a butcher box kind of a thing once a month, that does transfer into sales, but the everyday posts just do not really transfer into sales for me. So Facebook and Instagram, they have, if you're a business and if you are advertising your farm on Instagram or Facebook, I highly, highly recommend that you make sure you're using a business page and not your personal page, because if that is discovered, they have the ability to come down and shut you down. I mean, and they will. I've seen it happen in the restaurant industry many, many times. And then you're trying to gather back your information and convert it to a business page. So when you're a business, if you had 100 followers on Facebook, the algorithm kind of falls that less than 6% of the people who follow you see your post organically unless you spend money. So what I do is I do very short spurts of promotion, 2 to 3 days promotion, $2 to $3 a day. And then that way I have constant new content in front of people. I'm not seeing that same commercial-like thing in front of all my customer base. And so because I choose to advertise, I live in Dorchester County and I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And if I just advertise to my local community, that's not my target audience. I do get some of them, but most of my audience comes from Talbot County, Anne Arundel County, some of the beach area. I would say at least 50% of my customers drive 30 minutes one way, some drive an hour. So make sure if you're advertising, you take the time to pick a target audience. And I joke about, if you're selling meat, then vegans, vegetarians just aren't my target audience. I'm looking for people who like to cook or barbecue or keto or paleo or Weston A. Price or homeschoolers, or just, I kind of know my niche of a customer. And so far it's working, and I go back and I evaluate that usually about every 6 months and just say, am I where I need to be? You can tell me if I'm rambling too much, Amanda, okay? Because I can go on and on and on. But what I really want to encourage you to do, anytime you can, drive traffic to your website, because you own that content. I could wake up tomorrow, my Facebook page is gone, and I have no recourse. I was hacked about a year ago through social media because I had linked a payment to it, and they took, it was like a $2,500 hack overnight. So make sure you set a limit. I do want to throw that in there. Make sure you set a limit on your advertising so that you don't fall victim to that. And I have that you can't spend more than $3 to $5 a day. And if I do, they won't allow the marketing because that was not much fun. Claiming your business on Google, like I said, you'll go to claim my business. You'll just type it right in the search feature. You'll give all of your content. It will help you create that. And then that's where you can put your hours if you're open for the holiday, adding new photos. We don't want to just set it and forget it. And in the restaurant industry, I used to open up people's websites when I was sitting in front of them and it could be November, and I would open up their website and there would be something on there for Valentine's Day. So just be careful that you don't just walk away from that and not update pricing, not update inventory, and keep the content current. I don't care where I am, what event I'm in, anywhere like that. Always, always, always build your email list. I think my email list now is at 798, which isn't bad for being in the middle of nowhere. And if they're real customers, that's a nice base for me. I don't pay for anything like that. I do it all right here. I keep a book. It's a nice book, and looks, it has a nice monogram on it and all that. People come in and they sign and they write a little letter or whatever, and it makes them feel good. And then I take and manually convert that. And then anytime someone goes to my website, the first thing that pops up says, please subscribe to our newsletter. And that was done through GoDaddy. And that's constantly building. And I'm getting 2 to 3 customers every single day, or newsletter subscribers every single day now. Taking photos, I think that's somewhere that sometimes gets forgotten. Make sure your photos are clear. Make sure they're overexposed a little bit so they really pop off the page when somebody sees it. If you're not really good with photography, I would actually recommend having someone come in and hire. I'm not a fan of stock photos. I like for them to be authentic and mine. So when someone sees a picture of a cow, they come up here and it's like, oh yeah, I've seen that. So I hire a photographer to come to the farm once a year and take probably 10 to 12 shots of me and my husband, because I'm always behind the camera. If I want good photos of him and I have to have somebody else take them. And I think that's something that some people are very shy about. And it took me a while to get over it. It's like, oh, I don't really want to look like that, but that's who I am, and if I'm in the barn, then that's what it is. And people really enjoy that. And like I said, it goes back to authenticity. Don't try to be anybody else. Certainly use other farms for inspiration. And I follow farms all around the whole world. And I have people following me from everywhere. And I use them to inspire me, but I try not to copy them. And I would recommend the same thing, because sometimes it's hard to think of content. So let other people think of it for you. Try to be entertaining, also try to educate, and really every interaction, as I said earlier, doesn't need to be sales driven. So one thing that I, am pretty adamant about, that you attract what you project. So if you, I guess, use cheap pricing to draw customers in, I think you get customers that are cheap. So, and that's not something I want. And I have people who come to the farm, and when they see my pricing board, it's like, oh, wow, they didn't know that they were walking into, the ground beef was going to be almost double what it is anywhere else. And usually what I do is I give them a free pack of ground beef, and I thank them for coming out, and I hope that they enjoy it. And if they think it's worth the extra money, come back. I never want someone to feel less than. So that's important. Be hospitable. Always. Keeping your hours and things like that. So that it's a whole lot of information, and I could probably talk for 20 minutes about every single thing, but I did just want to kind of say, make sure you have a plan. It's just not going to happen. And it's a real part of the job. If you're going to direct market, the direct marketing, there are times where I have, my husband does the farm work, and I sit in here for 2 hours and just work on that. Because if the money doesn't come in, then the farming doesn't really work. And that's kind of what I've got here. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Darlene. I don't see questions in the chat at the moment, but
Okay.
reminder to people, if they want any of our
Hey, Amanda.
to expand on anything. Oh yeah, do you have a question, Leanna?
Well, the chat is disabled. We can't type anything.
Oh, really? Well, I do not know how that happened. In that case, I will look into that, but in the meantime, feel free to raise your hand maybe, and we can unmute people and ask questions that way. I did want to ask Craig and Molly, I know you, I'm not sure if either of you have, your own livestock that you market or anything, but you work with a lot of producers. So I was wondering, if you guys have anything to add on, tips that you've seen producers do that, maybe something unique, or maybe something, thinking outside the box that you've seen people do that have been successful in terms of like a marketing strategy, or, just some general, ideas for, if people are just getting into marketing and they're looking for, new ideas or thoughts there.
Okay, so the question is, at what point in time did you feel comfortable leaving your full-time job to farm full-time and said, well, that decision was made for me. So with the pandemic, we were put on leave for about 6 months. They brought us back. We had a second wave come in with the pandemic, and they decided to do away with my position across the whole country. And with 21 years, I got a really nice, for me, it was a nice severance package. And like I said, my husband is super supportive. And I said, I think I'm gonna make a go for it. I've been kind of working my way towards that transition. So I paid down debt, paid off my car, did all the infrastructure at the farm with my all farm income, plus with, NRCS grants and things like that. So that decision was made for me. And I decided to not go out and replace that job. I don't know if I'd ever had the nerve to do it, to be honest. It was very hard to walk away from that income. They made it for me.
Well, I think with the livestock folks that are, Darlene is probably one of the most effective and has one of the most effective programs that I've heard of. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Because you put a lot of time into it and you're identifying your customers. Most of my folks don't do that. Most of my folks, they may do farmers markets, which is a whole animal all in itself, and you've decided not to do that. Or they're selling off of their farm stands. There hasn't been a whole lot of boxed meat sales. And that's one of my next projects, is to try to start boxed meat sales. I think that, one of the kind of looking over the horizon on some things is that with prevailing winds and eating meat kind of taking a hit here and there, when I give talks, I usually tell people that, we eat too much meat. We should eat less meat, but we should be more selective about the meats that we buy and the meats that we consume. And those are the product lines that we're going after. So you mentioned niche meat sales. And I think that's probably, for the most part, what almost everybody on this call could be categorized as niche meat sales. And I will give a plug to the niche meat processors assisting network in case anybody is not a member of NMPAN, NMPAN. You should. It has a lively listserv where folks that do what we do talk a lot about regulatory issues, labeling issues, marketing issues, trying to reach customers. There are folks all over the country who are banded together to form co-ops, for instance. Southern Maryland Meats is not a co-op. Southern Maryland Meats is simply a program. I talked to some farmers in Iowa, believe it or not, grass-fed folks, grass-finished folks in Iowa, who are banding together to do a co-op type direct marketing meat sales. We at Southern Maryland Meats will be doing that, but that interjects another thing in that people will need to sell into the Southern Maryland Meats brand at a wholesale price so that we can in turn aggregate, distribute, and sell then under the Southern Maryland Meats brand to larger entities, and we have to make sure that the processing facility is self-supporting too. So lots of wrinkles on this program.
Great, thank you, Craig. And I did share the Niche Meat website that you referenced in the chat. So it's linked there for anybody who wants to investigate that if they're not familiar with it already. I also would like to, I didn't say this earlier, but Charlie and or Brian, if you guys have anything to add to this discussion, I see you're both still here. So if there's any other things that you think of as we're going along in the conversation and you would like to add as well, please feel free to do so. I don't see many other questions in the chat at this point. For any of our panelists, is there something you feel like we haven't touched on yet that you maybe wanted to mention or wanted to discuss a little bit? So it's hard in a Zoom room, you know, people may be shy to ask questions or to talk a little bit. But Darlene, I wanted to ask you, I know that you invite people to come, you know, onto your farm for, you know, obviously for the store, but also sometimes for other events or things. Can you just touch briefly on kind of some of the things that you do to try to get people to come to the farm and, you know, what has worked in that sense for you and your marketing?
So in my newsletter, we have a first Sunday farm tour. It's the only Sunday I'm open through the month. And I am open only 2 days a week and then other days by appointment because, you know, I guess I'm a selfish producer. You know, I don't want to sit in the farm store and wait for somebody to come up, and most of my customer base will reach out to me. But in my newsletter, I always invite people, whether we're having a farm tour or not a farm tour, if they want to learn more about our business, that I'd be glad to walk around with them. You know, and some people think they want to and other people don't. Like I said, it's not everybody wants to know the animal at some point they're going to consume, and other people really, really do. So those are the ones that usually tend to participate in the farm tours. I really, it's more of a, I'm driven by emotion on a lot of my decisions, but you know, I have this big drive to see young families get back to the dinner table and actually know where their meat comes from. And a lot of times the small children aren't as put off by it as their parents. The parents are trying to protect them. And in every single invitation, I always say, if you have children, bring them. Every question is welcomed, especially from the children. You know, and I have a sandbox set up and all things like that. But emotionally, I really want to see the next generation of people get back in the kitchen and sit down at the dinner table with their family. I was very, very fortunate to be raised that way. So I have that as a reference point. But the newsletter is my biggest thing for having on-farm tours or inviting people to come. And then I may have stopped doing it recently, but usually at the bottom of all my social media posts, I invite people to come to the farm. And I mean it. You know, I'm very sincere with it. It's important to me. So, you know, that's the main thing is the newsletter, and on my website, I have a tab for farm tours. I don't charge for them. At some point, if I can make them more elaborate or some interactive, but at this point, it's an emotional decision to invite people. And I feel very seldom do I ever have somebody come out that they don't go in the farm store and purchase a product. So I consider that my payment. It may not be the most economically savvy thing to do, but it's a choice I've made.
Great, thank you, Darlene. I don't know if Craig or Molly, you have any advice for anybody who maybe, you know, we've talked a lot on the farm store side and like having people come to the farm and using that as an avenue. Do you have any advice for anybody who's maybe looking more into kind of the, I don't want to say traditional, but like going to farmers markets and maybe looking at that as an avenue instead of having people on the farm or as an addition to having people on the farm? Do you have any thoughts or suggestions for people who might be considering that?
Well, I certainly, I mean, if you want to sell your product, you need to sell it someplace. The farmer's market avenue, first of all, I will say this. One of the things that we all sell, farmers markets, farm stands and all, we all sell frozen meat. And one of the ways, and that puts us at a disadvantage in many ways of people that want to buy fresh meat. So hence one of the things I've been working on with the Regional Agricultural Center is that we would be able to, in fact, sell and distribute fresh meat to be able to make buying local meat more attractive. Having said that, it's simply impossible to be able to have the livestock processed, get it back to the farm, keep it on the farm, and get it to farmers markets. And I'm not even sure farmers markets allow you to sell fresh meat anyway. So at any rate, if you want to do that, the farm store is an interesting proposition. We've also done mini grants that several people have been taken advantage of, mini grants to be able to build farm stores on their property. I think Darlene is taking a very heady and humane approach to it, in that I'm only going to be here a certain amount of time, folks. So if you want to see me, please stop by then. If it's at another time, let me know and I'll meet you there. But the business traffic is going to be pretty bad. There are, some stores, some retail facilities that will handle product. That gets into our labeling issue that we haven't talked too much about. I think labeling is extremely important if you're going to enter into a competitive marketplace. If people are coming to your farm stand or coming to your farmer's market stall, having the minimum information on a certain thing is important. Most that I've seen is just simply kind of black and white. Say what you need to say to make the FSIS happy, and then sell it. I don't think that's going to work in a competitive situation. You're going to need color. You're going to need labeling. You're going to have to put locally grown, grass finished. You're going to need to put all the fancy pants labeling on it than you can to be able to make it a distinctive product, and then incentivize people to probably pay a little bit more for that than they would other things. So at any rate, our thrust in Southern Maryland is to try to certainly appreciate and support existing marketing, existing sales channels for farmers markets, farm stands, whatever, but be able to add that additional layer of being able to have it sold, processed, and then sold locally, that you can actually avail yourself of fresh meat sales, and then, or be able to increase the size of your herd, potentially sell some wholesale into a bigger pot, which would be the Southern Maryland meats part, to be able to, in the case of hogs, make charcuterie, make prosciutto, make fancy stuff that we can sell for $20, $30, $40 a pound instead of the $10, $15 a pound that we've been talking about now.
And then I'll just add one thing. I know a lot of farmers markets each have their own rules. So if you're thinking about going that option, talk to the manager of the farmers market, make sure you're able to meet their requirements, and determine if that's the best route for you and your farm, and as far as marketing your products.
And I would just add that first I want to second everything Craig and Molly had said. A bulk of my work is with farmers markets, so it's usually around the market management I do most of my work with. But I would I always ask new vendors to have some kind of marketing goal you want to do with the farmers market. not just be at a farmer's market. Is the goal to drive awareness and sales to an on-farm market that maybe you just created. Also, I'd want to know as a vendor, when I was selling at farmers markets, I wanted to know what the anchor vendors did, and which are typically produce, right? That's the first thing everybody expects to find at a farmer's market is produce. Meat is just a bonus. So you can almost, the rule of thumb I always went by is, you know, whatever the, on average, the anchor vendor was doing on a weekly basis, I would expect to do half. And it might be more than that now in the fact if particularly if you have a way of accepting debit cards or credit cards, you know, through doing something through the iPhone, because if they're not, customers not totally expecting to find meat there, they're going there for their fruit and vegetables, but oh, well, they've got meat there, but I didn't bring enough cash for that. And most people, I don't know about you, but I'm not carrying around a lot of cash anymore these days. It's, you know, everything's via a card. So I think you could really help increase your sales if you make it as easy as possible for your customers to buy from you.
Thank you, Brian. I agree with that. I don't carry a whole lot of cash around myself either. We did have a question in the chat. I think this will direct to Darlene first, and then anyone else can chime in. Have you ever had issues with someone not understanding why or how things might be done on the farm, and then you get turned into a group such as the SPCA? This person used to allow people to come and look at the animals until there was a small issue with a pony that they had foundered, and it was turned in and caused a lot of headaches. So how do you deal with that type of thing? Have you had any issues with that?
So thankfully, no. We'll put that out there first, and hopefully I won't jinx myself. So I am the one who takes the farm tour, and I make it very clear while we're walking around, if you see something or if you have a question, ask it, so that I can at least give my standpoint of why you're seeing what you're seeing. So I don't let people just wander all around the farm. I mean, they wander out in the yard. You've been here. I mean, they wander out in the yard, and usually, you know, Saturday mornings, I bring the lambs up, you know, and let them be in the pasture that's closest to the yard. And, you know, we'll have one that's limping once in a while because, you know, animals limp. And my response to that is, you know, so do people. And we hurt ourselves sometimes. And in 2 to 3 days, that animal should recover. I've checked its feet. I've done everything necessary. If in 2 to 3 days, it's not showing improvement, then we will address it medically with a veterinarian. But I've been very lucky with that, but I try to really take control of that conversation. And if I see something, you know, I have a little bit of ADD, so chances are they're not seeing anything that I'm not seeing. And I don't act like the sheep's not limping if it's limping. I address it right there. So I've been very, very lucky with that. And we don't get a lot of farm tours because, you know, as much as the customer thinks they want to participate, you know, it's too cold, it's too windy, it's raining a little bit, it's 100 degrees. Now we do farm tours with University of Maryland. Eastern Shore brings a group every year. The Forage Cree people bring a group. I have homeschoolers who bring groups. It's not only, you know, that once a month farm tour. If I can make it work, I do. Just like with my farm store hours, we're open Wednesday evening, Saturday mornings. I'm 20 miles from the closest town of any size, and that's Easton. So for people aren't just going to drive by, I'm not on a road frontage. But no, we get a lot of groups, I guess, that come, and like I said, and I don't charge them either. And most of those are geared towards children. I hope I answered her question.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. The keys that, you know, I pull out of that are to, one, be very transparent, you know, with people and answer their questions honestly, and to, you know, encourage them to ask questions and feel, you know, like they can talk to you. I feel like that those two things can be applied to a lot of potential issues in agriculture in general, and trying to get the public to ask questions to, the farmer or the producer, rather than, learning why things are done the way they're done. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far, but I guess I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, so I might just kind of turn it over to everybody to see if you have any final words, any final thoughts, any take home key takeaways that you have that you'd like to share with the group.
I'm going to jump in there and say, and I've said it, if you are, and I don't know the audience as far as how many people are direct marketing here, whether you're at a farmer's market or direct marketing. I've not done farmers markets and I don't sell wholesale. Make the marketing part of your routine. Set it aside and say, I'm going to market. I'm going to set aside 3 hours on Monday and 2 to 3 hours on Wednesday. So I'm catching, beginning of the week, end of the week kind of a thing. Look at your insights when you're on these social media pages. There's tools for you to be able to look how much interaction did you get. If you're paying for advertising and it's not working, I shut down the advertising. If I have a 3-day advertisement going and in 24 hours I'm not getting any response, I know that campaign is a failure and I will abandon it in a second and go in another direction. But there are a lot of free channels out there that will give you insight on how to market. And farming is a business, unlike a lot of businesses, but the business end of it still is you have to market and have a story to tell. And I will help anybody. They're always welcome to send me an email. It's all on there. If I can help you, I will. And if not, I'll tell you where I've gone to get information.
Darlene. Craig, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I'm good. That I will echo Darlene. Anybody that wants to find out how Southern Maryland's approaching it, drop me a line.
Great, thank you. Molly, any final thoughts or takeaways there? I saw that you had put in the chat the website and said that your contact information was on there. Anything else that you wanted to add as a final?
Yep, so if you want to visit that website, if you have any questions on the requirements or regulations in Maryland to sell direct market, even if it's outside the state, just give me a call or look on our website to see if you can find the answers.
Great, thank you. And I saw earlier we had a comment from Wendy Davis with the Delaware Department of Agriculture. So she had listed her email in the chat as well. So for folks who are in Delaware and looking specifically for some of the Delaware rules, that might be a good resource for you as well. Brian, you're still with us. Did you have any final thoughts or takeaways that you wanted to add?
No, this was really, really great. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. Thank you to Brian and to all of our panelists and speakers for their time today. I guess my takeaways from this, which kind of echo a lot of what you heard Darlene and Craig and Molly say already, but have a plan, be thinking about your audience, consider your farming or your production operation as a business, and marketing is one of the roles and one of the important jobs in that business. So you need to set aside some time for it. And then think about ways that you can, be yourself. What sets your farm apart? What makes your farm unique? How can you kind of showcase that, through your advertising efforts? So I guess I'm not seeing any other questions, so we'll probably conclude there.